Well, hey everybody, I am here with Felicia and we want to discuss the sermon with all of you. It was an amazing sermon this past week, making peace with missing pieces. Honestly, I don't know how Pastor does it every single week. He always has such great content, and I love that this was just like a continuation from last week's message. So we wanted to keep the conversation going and just dive a little deeper into the message and give you some ways on how you can practically apply this message to your life. Pastor's kind of main point about this sermon was about sometimes all we see is broken pieces, but God sees the whole picture. And it was just such a great reminder about how we may not know where our life is gonna go or what our entire picture is gonna look like. But when we can trust God and fully surrender it to Him, we can trust that He has the best intentions in mind and that He is always gonna have a better plan for our lives than we can ever think. And He talked about how those missing pieces in our life, they're actually meant to be there, right? And those are the spaces that He can fill, and sometimes He will even send people to fill those pieces for you. And He talked about how sometimes you can not know something, but do we still have the faith to go? And I think those were just some of my main highlights from the message.
Yeah, that point that you just shared about can we still go even if we don't know is so good, and I felt really resonated with me. And everything I do in life, sometimes I'm like, hey, I know that this is from God and I know I need to walk in it, but I'm still scared and still fearful. So really filling that gap with faith is so important. And
I think it's so natural too, right? To still have that fear inside of us. I think it's something that we all struggle with. And it is just kind of this process of us learning how to just grow our faith more and more. So we have a puzzle in front of us, just going along with this whole theme of making peace with broken pieces and missing pieces, really. But I'm really hoping that there is no missing pieces in this puzzle, because we are not puzzle people.
No.
But as we discuss the sermon, we are going to attempt to put it back together and see what the full picture is. So let's take a look at this sermon clip and we'll discuss it. So check this out.
Unless we think that the only way for us to have peace is to have no missing pieces. And this is where a lot of us who are perfectionists, I'm talking Enneagram 1, we think everything has to be just so for us to be happy, for us to be grateful. And so we get in this thing all the time. A lot of us do, not all of us, but we get in this thing a lot of the time that we say, win this, then I'll. Win this, then I'll. Now, the worst thing you can believe, please hear me, the worst thing that you can believe is that when you get here, then God will love you. That is from the pit of hell. That is a lie. That is not in the Bible. It is by grace you are saved. And if you've got grace, you got a lot. You got the greatest gift. His name is Jesus!
Wow, I loved that clip from Pastor Steven. It was definitely speaking to me for sure, and I'm sure it spoke to a lot of you as well, but I really liked when Pastor said, when this, then I, and how a lot of us just think, everything has to be just so for God to love us or for God to bless us with something. And that's not true. That's not biblical truth. That's not who God is. But a lot of times we resort to that thinking when we go to the first question, who am I, versus going, who is God? And really sitting in that and understanding that and letting that kind of resonate with us. And so, I found that point for sure stood out to me.
I think for me, like a big thing was that I almost like doubted God a lot in my life. And I can think back to times where I wasn't trusting in kind of His plan for my life. And I wasn't making peace with all of these pieces that I thought that I needed and were missing. I think back to this time where I wasn't married yet. And I really thought maybe I was never going to get married, that God didn't have that special person for me. And I really struggled with that. And I thought, you know what, God, I don't know why you're doing this, but I eventually came to a point where I said, I just need to surrender this to you. I need to trust you and believe if you do choose to send me that husband, then that's going to be amazing. But if you don't, I'm going to be okay with that too.
Yeah.
And that took a lot of surrender, and that took a lot of faith, and God did it. Me and Steven and I have been married for a few years now, but I really used to think like, okay, God, when I get to that point, then I'll be a better Christian, or then I will be complete. Then I have achieved my life purpose. But I realize there's so much more to that.
Yeah.
It's so much more about your relationship with Christ first. And when you get that right, everything else flows out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who hasn't been there?
I know.
I've definitely had those thoughts. And I think the season that I'm in right now, I'm definitely coming to that place of just like peace and surrender with the missing pieces. So
yeah. For sure. So I guess my question for you, and kind of for all of you watching, to think about, like, how do we practically make peace then with these missing pieces? What are some things that we can do to live that out?
I mean, I know that we've talked about it before, but really just looking at who God is, and who he's been in the past in our lives, and how he's shown up in provision and his faithfulness. And I know for me, there's a long time ago where Holly preached a sermon and talked about peace markers, and really writing down those peace markers and acknowledging where God's shown up and where you can kind of tangibly see his faithfulness. And so that's been something that I've carried with me, especially these last couple of years, and just seeing who God has been for me. And even if I'm not sure if it's God, I still write it down, and then I go back and I'm like, oh, of course it was you. So I think being able to write it and see it in print, like, this is who God has been in my life, and this is
makes a difference.
Who he is, for sure.
I think for me, it's kind of what you're saying, like, to make peace with it. Like, I have to collect evidence of all the times that God is faithful, because it can be so natural to collect evidence about the things that are going wrong in our life and focus on that. But if we can flip that script and write down all the times that we've seen God show up or God do a miracle, and use that to be our hope and to build our faith on that foundation, and not the foundation that God isn't going to do this, but believe that he has before, and he's going to do it again. I think that can really help us walk in peace. And I love what you're saying. It's about knowing who God is. And that starts through reading his word. That starts through prayer. That even starts with getting around a community of people that can help you and support you and encourage you, right? There's so much power when someone says, like, I believe in you, I'm proud of you, like, you're doing the right thing. So do you have those people in your life that can support you and call out the greatness in you and call out that God is going to fill those spaces? You just have to keep waiting on him and trusting in him.
Yeah, for sure. And even just hearing, like, I know in my e-group, a lot of times I would be in a season of doubt, and then I hear someone else talking about how God's been faithful in their life, and that's really encouraged me and spurred me on in my walk. So
yeah, I love that. Well, I hope that you found that helpful. I hope that you can be just collecting that evidence for all the times that God has been faithful in your life, to help you just keep that peace, and to write it down, and to go back and rewatch these sermons. I find when I watch it 2 or 3 times, I always get so much more out of it. And you have beautiful notes, I can see over here. But just writing it down, there really is so much power. And then doing things in front of you to make it practical, like doing a puzzle, so that whatever you can do to make that sermon stick. So thanks for chatting with me today. Love having all of you on here, and we'll see you soon.